It was 2:13 in the morning when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the backyard. Half asleep, I tapped the app, assuming it was a raccoon again. But instead of fur and whiskers, the screen showed something entirely different. Karen from the HOA, in a blinding leopard print swimsuit, balancing a wine glass while leading two of her friends through my backyard gate like she owned the place. She looked right into the camera, winked and said, "Private pool, my A****. One of her guests, carrying a giant inflatable flamingo, tripped on the garden hose and face-planted into my tulips. And then Karen, president of the HOA, self-declared guardian of neighborhood values, did a cannonball into my pool at 2 a.m. This wasn't a joke or some drunk dare. This was the beginning of something much worse. A week earlier I had noticed something off. A used towel I didn't recognize was hanging over my pool chair, and there were muddy footprints along the edge. At first, I blamed neighborhood kids hopping the fence. But something didn't sit right. I had just installed that pool, something I worked overtime for, designed myself, and even landscaped the backyard around. It was mine. Private. Off limits. Yet the moment I saw that towel, I had a gut feeling it wasn't kids I was dealing with. It was someone bolder. Someone who thought the rules never applied to her. Karen had always been a problem, even before the pool. She knocked on my door 2 days after I moved in, holding a clipboard and an overly wide smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Karen, the HOA president. Just so you know, your mailbox doesn't match the HOA-approved paint code." That was my introduction. Since then, she had fined me for a garden gnome she claimed was unsettling, and once left a citation on my window for having garage door grease visible from the street. She was the type who carried a measuring tape in her purse to make sure grass heights stayed within regulation. But the pool, oh, that pool seemed to trigger something entirely different in her. She began showing up unannounced, pretending she was there to inspect runoff irrigation. She would stand on the sidewalk and just stare at it through the gate. One time I heard her mutter, "Should be a shared resource." It wasn't subtle. She believed that if something nice existed in the neighborhood, it should belong to the HOA. Meaning her. Still, I tried to be civil. I reinforced the side gates, installed a camera system, and even trimmed the bushes so she couldn't claim visibility concerns. But none of that mattered to Karen. She saw something she wanted and decided it was hers. The night I caught her on camera was the final straw. Her guests splashed like toddlers, playing loud music, and Karen even climbed onto the diving board with a glittery beach towel tied around her neck like a cape. She yelled, "HOA Queens forever!" before doing a belly flop that sent half the pool water into my flower beds. I recorded the entire thing. Every dive, every shriek, every moment of trespassing. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up editing clips and emailing them to myself, just in case she tried to deny it. The next morning, I walked straight to her house with a flash drive. I kept it professional, calm even. I knocked, and when she opened the door in a pink robe and cucumber eye patches, I handed her the drive and said, "You might want to watch this before your HOA meeting this afternoon." She didn't say a word, just closed the door. I figured that was the end of it. That maybe, just maybe, shame would finally do what rules and reason never could. I was wrong. 3 hours later, a notice appeared in my mailbox. A formal complaint from the HOA, citing me for negligent gate security and failure to maintain community standards regarding aquatic accessibility. I had to reread it 3 times. She had actually filed a complaint against me, for her own break-in. To top it off, she'd attached a bill for a supposed safety evaluation of the pool area, which she claimed her guests had to conduct due to suspected pH imbalance. The total, $275. The audacity was Olympic level. That afternoon, she called an impromptu HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but I knew the routine. Karen always had a way of spinning things in her favor. She'd painted me before as a non-compliant participant in neighborhood harmony. This time, I was sure she was calling me dangerous, paranoid, maybe even mentally unstable for installing so many cameras. It didn't matter that those same cameras had just saved me from actual property abuse. In Karen's world, the truth was whatever she repeated the loudest. Later that evening, one of the more decent board members, Cheryl, dropped by and said, "You didn't hear it from me, but Karen's pushing to declare your pool a shared recreational space under some ancient clause from the original HOA charter." My jaw dropped. Cheryl explained that the clause mentioned something about neighborhood amenities, contributing to collective wellness, which Karen was interpreting to mean she had a right to use any nice thing in the area, if she could claim it was for wellness. I went back inside and stared at the pool. My pool. Built with my paycheck. Maintained by my hands. Designed as a place to escape people like Karen. And now she was trying to turn it into a community bathhouse. That's when I knew I had to fight differently. Logic wasn't enough. Fines wouldn't scare her. I needed something unforgettable. Something she wouldn't just regret, but slip on. Literally. And that was when the idea hit. A prank? Yes. A petty one? Absolutely. But legal, safe, and poetic? Even better. I remembered a conversation I'd once had with a friend in special effects, about a stunt material used in water shows. It looked like water, dissolved like bath gel, but turned any surface it touched into the slickest thing imaginable. They called it slippery blue. And in that moment, standing at the edge of my pool, staring at the ripple where Karen had trespassed, I smiled for the first time in days. It was time to turn this HOA nightmare into a cautionary tale. If Karen wanted to wade into private property, I'd make sure her next dip was unforgettable. Not with violence, not with confrontation, but with one epic, blue, legally safe surprise. The following morning felt like walking into a sitcom written by a sleep-deprived lawyer. There was another envelope in my mailbox, this time thicker, complete with printed flyers and an official-looking HOA letterhead. Karen had gone public. The flyer read, "Are you safe? Unauthorized chemicals in backyard pools could harm children and pets. Know your neighbors. Demand transparency." And right beneath that, in bold type, was a blurry still from my security footage, artfully cropped so that it looked like my backyard was a communal spa with shady undertones. I couldn't believe it. Karen had somehow twisted the narrative and distributed it across the entire neighborhood. I saw one of my neighbors holding the flyer, frowning and shaking his head. He didn't even know what he was mad about, just that someone told him to be. I marched back inside, poured myself the strongest coffee I could manage, and pulled up the full footage again. I debated releasing it online but paused. As satisfying as that might be, I needed to play it smart. Karen thrived in public drama. She would spin any online backlash into targeted harassment against a community leader. No, I had to be methodical, strategic. I wasn't going to give her another excuse to cry victim. Later that afternoon, as I was raking leaves, I spotted Karen walking past my yard with two new accomplices, Trudy and Neil, both self-declared compliance assistants. She stopped in front of my fence, took photos of my hedges, and muttered something about excessive height. Then Neil pulled out a clipboard, scribbled notes, and even took a measuring tape to the mulch line. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. Just strutted up and started inspecting like they were the IRS. I called out, "Can I help you with something?" Karen looked over her sunglasses and replied, "Just ensuring the community is safe and up to code." She winked. Trudy giggled. Neil looked like he was trying not to laugh. I didn't reply. I simply turned back and started watering the roses, each droplet aimed with quiet fury. The next few days escalated like a bad soap opera. Karen had apparently made a copy of my gate key during one of her earlier invasions, and I discovered this the hard way. While I was out running errands, she snuck in again. This time, she brought guests. I came home to find the gate slightly ajar, wet footprints on my patio, empty cans of sparkling wine on the edge of the pool, and, most insultingly, a half-eaten cheese platter floating on a flamingo raft. They'd left a mess of epic proportions. Towels thrown over hedges, my outdoor speaker soaked and silent, and a broken string of solar lights that now blinked like a dying disco ball. I checked the cameras again. They arrived at noon and left around 4. Karen even had the nerve to toss a thumbs up at the camera as she left, shouting thanks for the hospitality. I was livid, but more than that, I was stunned by the shamelessness. I called the police, reported the trespassing, but all they could do was make a note. Without a clear sign that the pool area was private property and no trespassing signs, it was a gray zone. Apparently, having a fence and a locked gate wasn't enough anymore. The officer, while sympathetic, shrugged and said, "Technically, this is a civil matter unless you want to press for criminal trespass. But if they claim they thought it was HOA-approved access, it gets messy." Messy. That was the right word. Everything Karen touched turned into a swamp of twisted logic and self-righteous declarations. That night, I drained and cleaned the pool. Every inch. I didn't trust what she might have added, so I sanitized every filter, every pipe. While I worked, I found something wedged under the skimmer, a tub labeled Homemade Soft Skin Spa Mix. The label was handwritten in gold marker. I opened it. The smell was nauseating, like lavender and expired fish oil had a fight in a blender. Whatever it was, it had no business in a pool. I texted my friend Jenna, a chemist who worked in water safety. She told me adding unknown organic materials could clog the filtration system and possibly create harmful bacteria blooms. I stared at the tub in my hands and imagined Karen pouring it into my water, thinking she was doing me a favor. Or worse, trying to sabotage it slowly, then blaming me. The next morning, I received another HOA violation. This one said, "Failure to maintain appropriate community cleanliness after social gatherings." It included a printed photo of the wet patio and cheese platter remains. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning and a fine of $300. I stormed to the HOA office, demanded an explanation, and was told by the secretary that Karen had submitted an anonymous complaint. When I asked why an anonymous complaint could trigger a fine, the secretary shrugged. "She's the president. She knows the bylaws." I knew I had to act fast, so I started digging. I reread the entire HOA charter, from cover to cover, page by agonizing page. That's when I found it. Buried deep in a section labeled Community Resource Easements, there was a clause from 1994 that vaguely stated properties within the HOA that featured special amenities conducive to group well-being may be requested for occasional community use pending review. That was Karen's angle. She was trying to argue that my pool fell under that umbrella. But there was a line just beneath it that made my heart skip. It clarified that such use must be approved by the property owner in writing and subject to insurance compliance. Which I never gave, never signed, never even discussed. Armed with that, I contacted my friend Thomas, a lawyer specializing in property rights. He reviewed everything, smiled, and said, "She's bluffing. This doesn't hold up. In fact, if she accessed your property under that claim without your consent, she's liable. Especially if she brought others in." I finally felt a sliver of relief. Not only was Karen wrong, she was legally exposed. I asked him to draft a cease and desist letter outlining the violations, the footage, the unauthorized access, and the potential liabilities of chemical tampering. It was beautifully worded. Professional, brutal, and ironclad. But I wasn't done. I wanted Karen to know what it felt like to be humiliated. Not in a cruel or reckless way, but with the same smug energy she brought to my doorstep. That's when I made the trip to the pool supply store. I walked down the aisles, looking for chlorine and pH balancers, and then I heard it. 2 employees talking about prank products for birthday parties. One mentioned a gel used in water shows to make surfaces super slippery, but completely safe and biodegradable. They called it Slippery Blue. It was designed to dissolve after a few hours, harmless to filters, and impossible to detect by sight once mixed in. I asked how much they had. The guy laughed and said, "Why? Planning a pool stunt." I just smiled and replied, "Something like that." That night, I went home with a trunk full of slippery blue and a grin that hadn't left my face since the HOA office. Karen had invited herself into my sanctuary one too many times. Now, if she wanted in again, she was going to get the most unforgettable swim of her life. The cameras were set. The gate was cracked just enough. And the water? Well, the water was about to be a whole new experience. The next few days passed in absolute silence, which in Karen's world was suspicious. I had come to expect some level of intrusion, noise, or nosy questions shouted over the fence. But now, nothing. No flyers. No patrols. Not even the sound of her dog barking at the wind. It was as if Karen had entered a hibernation chamber to recalibrate whatever HOA schemes she was cooking. I didn't let my guard down. If anything, the calm made me more alert. Every time my phone buzzed with a motion alert, I checked the footage like I was disarming a bomb. For 3 days there was nothing. Then, on the 4th evening, I caught the silhouette I'd been waiting for. Karen was back. It started just after sunset. My exterior lights hadn't triggered yet, but the cameras had switched to night mode. Karen crept into the frame with 2 women behind her. Trudy again, and someone new, shorter, carrying a tote bag that looked suspiciously like it held enough wine for a graduation party. Karen wore what could only be described as a glitter robe, with her initials monogrammed across the back. Her hair was tied up in an elaborate bun, and she held a Bluetooth speaker like a boombox from the 80s. They giggled as they approached the gate. Karen pulled out a key from her bag and, with a flick of the wrist, let herself in like she owned the place. I watched live from my phone, sitting quietly inside the house with the lights off and blinds drawn. I had parked my car down the block earlier that day, giving the illusion that I was out of town again. I even left a couple of travel bags by the front door, just visible through the window, hoping Karen's predatory senses would pick up the bait. And they did. She pushed open the gate and waved her hand with theatrical flair. "Welcome back to Club HOA," she shouted. Her voice echoed against the walls of my fence. One of the women raised her plastic cup and replied, "You weren't kidding, this is better than the community pool." They wasted no time. Karen queued up a playlist, something with upbeat, bass-heavy beats, and the group started setting up like it was spring break. One woman rolled out a towel on my patio, and another unpacked snacks onto a patio table they didn't have permission to use. Karen danced along the edge of the pool, still wearing that ridiculous glitter robe, and then dramatically dropped it to reveal the same leopard swimsuit from her last invasion. "Watch this, girls," she declared, climbing onto the diving board with the grace of a drunken flamingo. She didn't notice the slight shimmer of the surface, or the way the water seemed a little too glossy. She definitely didn't know what slippery blue looked like. She jumped. Not a cannonball this time. A full dive, headfirst, arms forward like an Olympic athlete. The moment she hit the water, her body vanished beneath the surface with a splash, and then, chaos. As she tried to stand, she slid. Not just a normal slip, but like her feet were skating across oil. She grabbed for the edge, missed, and flopped back in with a splash that soaked one of her guests. The guest shrieked and slipped too, tumbling backward onto a float that shot out from under her and launched her toward the shallow end. Trudy tried to grab the pool ladder and missed completely, landing face first into the water with a scream that sounded like a whale in distress. Karen scrambled to her feet inside the pool, tried to shout orders, and then slipped again, this time grabbing a flamingo raft for balance. It deflated instantly with a loud pop. The water exploded with flailing limbs, screeches, and one woman frantically dog-paddling toward the deep end like it would save her. The Bluetooth speaker fell into the water mid-song and sparked, then died with a hiss. That got everyone's attention. The 3 of them shrieked like toddlers who had just seen a ghost. One guest scrambled out and fell on the patio, which had just enough gel residue to send her sliding across the cement into a lawn chair, knocking it over in a crash. I watched it all from my couch, tears in my eyes from laughing. Every second was caught on multiple camera angles. I even had close-ups set up to catch faces, because this was never just about property. It was about accountability. And humiliation has a funny way of bringing that to the surface, especially when you do it to yourself. Karen finally got out of the water, drenched, mascara running down her face, looking like a raccoon in a hurricane. She picked up the flattened flamingo raft and shouted something unintelligible before stomping toward the gate. Her foot hit a slick patch, and she almost went down again but caught herself just in time. She turned to her guests and said, "We're leaving. This place is cursed." Then they all hurried out, slipping every few steps like slapstick comedians. I waited until the gate slammed behind them, and then rewound the footage 3 times. The laughter wouldn't stop. I hadn't smiled like that in weeks. The next morning, it was as if the neighborhood had been electrified. My phone buzzed nonstop. Someone had posted a 10-second clip online, likely one of Karen's guests who'd seen the footage or somehow recorded the fiasco herself. The clip was titled, "HOA President Learns Slippery Karma is Real," and it was already spreading like wildfire. By noon, it had been reshared on multiple neighborhood forums. I didn't say a word. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The internet had done what logic, law, and letters couldn't. Karen came by my house that afternoon, but not to apologize. She stood at the edge of my driveway, red-faced and fuming, arms crossed like she was about to summon a storm. "You think this is funny?" she yelled. "You could have hurt someone." I calmly stepped outside and replied, "Everything I used is legal, pool-safe, biodegradable, and documented on receipt. If you had permission to be there, you might have grounds for complaint. But you didn't. So maybe call your lawyer before you make threats on camera again." She looked up, and for the first time, noticed the tiny new camera I had mounted just above the front porch. Karen left without another word. No lecture. No clipboard. Just a tight jaw and a walk of shame back to her home 2 blocks down. That night, the video made it to a bigger audience. A popular content creator reposted it with commentary about HOA power trips and the dangers of entitled trespassers. The view count exploded. Karen's glitter robe became a meme. Someone photoshopped it onto a fish slipping on a rock. Another person added captions like, "When you forget private property laws still exist." For the first time in months, I felt like I had control again. Karen had crossed the line too many times, and this wasn't revenge, it was a mirror. A slippery, hilarious mirror that showed her exactly who she had become. The best part? I hadn't even needed to speak. I let her tell the world everything with her own actions, and the world laughed right back. And that, I realized, was the true beauty of poetic justice. By the next morning, the fallout had begun. Karen had always walked around the neighborhood like she was invincible, but now her walk was faster, her posture a little less proud, and her sunglasses a little bigger, as if hiding from something no shade could protect her from. The HOA's emergency meeting was scheduled within 24 hours, and not surprisingly, it was being held in Karen's backyard. I didn't go, but I didn't have to. Half the neighborhood practically live-streamed it through texts, photos, and not-so-subtle whispers. What was supposed to be her chance to save face turned into a complete implosion. I heard from Cheryl, the only decent board member, that Karen started the meeting with a fiery speech about neighborhood safety and property misuse, but within minutes, someone from the crowd raised their hand and asked, "Aren't you the one who slipped into that guy's pool like it was a water park?" The whole crowd erupted in nervous laughter. Karen tried to control it, tried to spin the story, claiming it was an innocent inspection gone wrong, but someone pulled up the viral video on their phone. Right there, mid-meeting, they hit play. The audio echoed loud enough for those of us 3 houses down to hear it. Karen's shriek, the crashing floaties, and the splash that launched her wig across the pool all played in vivid detail. By the end of the clip, she was screaming at the top of her lungs that the video was doctored, that she was being targeted, that I was some kind of digital manipulator trying to sabotage her role. but her towel was in the frame. Her voice was crystal clear. And the real clincher was the close-up shot of her glitter robe embroidered with Karen Q, HOA President. Someone froze the frame and zoomed in right there in the meeting. Her credibility didn't just slip, it completely dissolved. That night, I received a knock at my door. It was Cheryl again, holding a thick folder and a small smile that carried both amusement and apology. She handed me the folder and said, "You might want to read this. Karen submitted an official injury complaint. Says she sustained a back sprain and emotional trauma from your slippery pool incident." I stared at her in disbelief. Cheryl added, "She's also trying to bill you for a replacement Bluetooth speaker and a spa robe." Inside the folder was the complaint in all its dramatic glory, complete with printed screenshots of her soaked and furious face as she flailed in the water. I didn't even need to respond. My lawyer Thomas had already been compiling evidence. He added this latest complaint to the stack and started putting together a full legal timeline. At this point, it was more than just trespassing. It was defamation, harassment, and attempted insurance fraud. The receipts for the prank product, the camera footage, the HOA notices she'd faked, the gate key duplication, all of it painted a picture even a bored county judge would salivate over. Still, Thomas advised patience. "We're close. Let her keep digging. She's building your case for you." While Karen scrambled to clean up the mess, she got careless. One of the neighbors, Ben, a guy who'd recently sold his home to a property company, mentioned something strange. Karen had approached him a month ago asking about the buyer. She had asked if they were interested in converting parts of the neighborhood into luxury rental spaces, specifically ones with communal attractions. Ben said he brushed her off, but now, with the pool incident, something clicked. I asked him if he had anything in writing. He forwarded me an old email Karen had accidentally CC'd him on, which detailed her conversation with a developer, suggesting that some homes in the HOA area could be used for seasonal recreational rentals and shared resource experiences. The plan was bigger than just my pool. Karen was trying to pitch parts of the neighborhood as semi-open recreational zones to boost property value and her own clout. She had already started testing the waters, quite literally, with mine. And who knows how many others she planned to bully into compliance before presenting her grand plan to the board. I sent the email to Thomas, who added it to the stack. Then I printed the whole thread, organized it with a timeline, and dropped it off anonymously at the HOA office. The next day, the office was in chaos. 2 board members resigned by noon, and a third demanded an emergency vote to suspend Karen pending investigation. By sunset, Karen's car was gone from her driveway. No meeting, no clipboard patrols, just silence. But she wasn't finished. That weekend, a process server showed up at my door with a thick envelope. Karen was officially suing me for defamation, personal injury, and emotional distress. I opened the paperwork, skimmed through the claims, and couldn't help but laugh out loud at the part where she said I deliberately lured her into a booby-trapped aquatic space with malicious intent. My lawyer almost cried from laughing when he read it. We didn't even have to respond before the universe stepped in. A week later, the case was dismissed. The judge reviewed the footage, noted the clear signs of trespassing, reviewed the product safety documentation, and wrote in the dismissal that the plaintiff appeared to have manufactured her own humiliation. The line was so perfect that Cheryl printed it out and taped it on the bulletin board at the HOA clubhouse. Word spread fast. The neighborhood was done with Karen. Parents who used to tolerate her rulebook quietly thanked me when they passed by. A retired couple even brought over cookies and said, "That video? Best comedy we've seen in years." I didn't care about the attention. What mattered most was that my space, my sanctuary, was mine again. But Karen still had one move left. Just when I thought it was all over, I received a forwarded message from a friend in another city. Karen had applied for a consulting job with a suburban property development firm. Her pitch? That she was an expert in HOA engagement and community recreation strategy. Attached was a promotional document she'd created, complete with photos of her previous projects. And there it was, my pool. Cropped, edited, and completely stripped of context, labeled as Example, Integrated Aquatic Community Feature. I couldn't believe it. She had taken the very footage that ruined her and turned it into her portfolio. Thomas sent a letter of cease and desist to the firm she applied to, including the original footage and a short clip of her slipping off the flamingo. The response from the firm was immediate and hilarious. Not only did they reject her application, but the HR department replied with a thank you note and added that, "Our staff needed a laugh this week. Yours provided several." And just like that, Karen's last desperate attempt to spin the story in her favor collapsed. Her name became synonymous with exactly the kind of HOA leadership no one wanted. My neighbors slowly began repairing the social fabric she'd tried to strangle, and the board finally voted in a new president. Cheryl. Her first act? A motion to officially declare all private pools off-limits to HOA involvement. Passed. Unanimously. Karen still lived on the edge of the neighborhood, but she kept her head down. No more patrols. No more threats. No more glitter robes. Just silence, and the occasional glance from a neighbor who'd seen the video, raised an eyebrow, and smirked to themselves. The final chapter of this ridiculous saga didn't begin with a bang but with a surprisingly calm morning. The sky was clear, the air was warm, and for once my backyard felt like the peaceful retreat I had always imagined it to be. The pool water sparkled without any unwanted bubbles or floating flamingos, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally exhale. Karen had vanished from the neighborhood spotlight. Her HOA presidency was officially revoked, the lawsuit had backfired spectacularly, and she hadn't made a public appearance since the firm she applied to circulated her recreational aquatic disaster video during a staff lunch. But even with all of that, I couldn't quite relax. People like Karen don't usually retreat forever. They stew. They regroup. They plot. And I had a feeling one last desperate move was coming. It didn't take long. 1 week after the dust had settled, Cheryl stopped by with a look on her face that said it all. She held up her phone and said, "You're not going to believe this." She handed it to me and hit play. It was footage from the security camera at the HOA clubhouse. There, in the grainy clip, was Karen, at midnight, breaking in through the side door with a set of keys she apparently hadn't returned. She headed straight for the filing cabinet, yanked out a drawer, and began stuffing documents into a large tote bag. Cheryl had only discovered it because she'd checked the motion logs after noticing a missing folder about HOA expenditures. Apparently, Karen had been trying to erase any trace of the shady deals she'd been part of while serving as president, likely to protect herself from an audit or worse. Cheryl had already reported the break-in to the police, and they were treating it seriously. Tampering with official HOA records was a criminal offense, and now they had solid video evidence. The officer in charge recognized her from the pool video and joked, "This lady's going to end up with a trilogy of cases at this rate." The investigation was underway, and I didn't need to be involved. But something told me that Karen wasn't finished trying to settle her score with me, even if she was now legally cornered. That hunch was confirmed 2 days later. I returned home from the grocery store to find something odd in my driveway. A wooden crate, unmarked, sitting near my garage door. There was no delivery slip, no label, nothing. I cautiously opened it, half expecting it to be a dead raccoon or a glitter bomb. Instead, it was full of garden gnomes. 37 of them, all identical, with devilish grins and middle fingers raised. Every single one looked exactly like the one she had once fined me for placing in my front yard. It was her version of a farewell message. No note, no explanation, just silent mockery. I didn't report it. I didn't retaliate. I simply took a photo of the crate, posted it to the neighborhood forum, and captioned it, "Looks like someone's running a clearance sale on petty behavior." The comments exploded. Neighbors who had remained quiet during the earlier chaos finally spoke up. Dozens of stories emerged, times when Karen had overstepped, lied, manipulated, or bullied others into submission. People felt free to share now that the queen bee had been dethroned. And just like that, Karen lost the last shred of power she had left: her reputation. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed. Without Karen policing garden colors or dictating mailbox heights, people started getting creative. Kids painted their fences. Seniors planted wildflowers. One guy even set up a tiny outdoor library booth shaped like a dragon's head. No fines. No lectures. Just laughter and community. Cheryl took her role seriously, leading with transparency and fairness. She invited input from everyone, held open meetings with snacks and drinks, and even started a monthly event called Yard Day where neighbors helped each other with small projects. To celebrate the new era, Cheryl approached me with a wild idea. "How about we throw a real pool party?" she said. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean here?" She nodded. "Only if you're okay with it. No trespassing. No HOA mandates. Just people. Permission. And fun." After some thought, I agreed. But I made one condition. We install a sign that says, "Entry by invitation only." Karen not included. She laughed so hard she nearly dropped her lemonade. We planned it for a Saturday, made it potluck style, and kept it small, just close neighbors and a few friends. When the day arrived, people brought pool toys, homemade snacks, and more laughter than I'd heard in the neighborhood in years. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker, but we made sure to keep it far away from the pool. Kids ran through sprinklers. Adults shared stories. People toasted to the end of tyranny with plastic cups. For the first time, my pool wasn't a battleground. It was a community. One I chose to be a part of. Karen never showed her face that day. But I did see her once. Just before sunset, I noticed her standing at the far end of the block, behind her curtains, watching through a tiny gap. Maybe she thought no one could see her. Or maybe she just couldn't help herself. But I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I just smiled, because she was exactly where she belonged, on the outside, looking in. Weeks turned into months, and the story of Karen's epic downfall became a local legend. The video resurfaced from time to time, always finding new life with a new meme or remix. Someone added slow-motion sound effects. Another person replaced the audio with dramatic music from a superhero movie. At some point, it reached a local news outlet that ran a special segment on HOA horror stories. Guess which clip they used to open the piece? The final twist came on a random Tuesday morning when I got a message from an old friend who lived 2 towns over. He sent a photo of a newly posted job opening at a retirement condo complex. The role? Community Pool Hygiene Coordinator. The applicant featured in the photo? Karen. Same glitter robe. Same manicured smile. Different town. But the caption underneath made my jaw drop. It read, "Passionate about community order and water recreation safety. Previously led a successful HOA recreational initiative." I didn't respond to the message. I didn't warn the new community. I figured they'd find out soon enough. Some lessons, after all, need to be learned firsthand. And besides, I was busy enjoying my garden, my pool, and the unexpected peace that followed one of the wildest chapters of my life. Every now and then, when I'm trimming the hedges or sipping coffee on the porch, I glance over at the gate. It still has the lock I installed during the Great Invasion, still shines under the afternoon sun. But now, it's more than just metal and bolt. It's a reminder that boundaries matter. That respect isn't optional. And that sometimes the best revenge doesn't come from shouting or suing. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground, smiling through the absurdity, and letting the slippery truth do all the work. And if that truth just so happens to be a pool full of biodegradable blue gel, well, I'd say that's just poetic.